First, I'd just like to thank everyone for being here today to listen in and to watch this conversation on a topic that I find very important, and that is history. We are doing a bit of an informal conversation today just to kind of flesh out what that looks out and preserving it and the tools we use to do that. So the first question I would like to ask to the panelists is, what is the importance of art in the telling of history? And I'd like to direct this to you, Sylvia, first.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. First, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to think about and reflect on the whole question of art and history. And thanks, Thandiwe, for moderating and Emily for organizing. I think that art presents a very wise opportunity for us to take time to reflect and to interrogate and explore what history means. Art can also allow us to document experiences, document that history, uncover things that have been hidden, both unintentionally and intentionally. Art can allow, and I think this is one of the most important aspects of it, it can allow a multiplicity of voices and perspectives. So maybe I'll just stop there and hear Joana.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here this morning. I agree. I think that the documentation piece is a really important one. And I would add to that that art is also a facilitator. To me, it's a facilitator for having sometimes difficult and uncomfortable conversations. It allows to sort of soften the prickliness of some of those conversations that can happen. So I see art also as almost like a mediator in these conversations. It's a way to reach across to each other and to reach across time and space also, and to reflect on how we might understand one another, how we might understand what has happened and how it's still happening, and really bear witness to our histories. So that's the only thing I would add.
Yeah, I think that's in my experience that's a very apt description, and it immediately brought to mind a couple of experiences, especially when I travel or I show my documentaries. And I particularly remember being in a junior high school. I can't remember, I think it might have been in St. John's, Newfoundland, and I was showing one of my films, and because it deals with issues of race and identity, and it was a whole gymnasium full of junior high students, and a number of the teachers said to me, oh, well, they're not going to ask questions because, you know, they're not used to it, but the hands would shoot up, right? They'd shoot up, and these students had questions, and so the film allowed them that opportunity to ask questions and to talk about something that was beyond their experiences, but that they were curious about, and no one had talked to them about the fact that there had been Black people in Canada forever, or that there was people who were enslaved, both Indigenous and African Canadian. So yeah, it allowed that conversation to happen because people could focus on that screen and what was going on there, and it wasn't kind of trying to call out their next door neighbor sitting beside them. It was a way to focus that attention.
Yeah, it becomes like a point of commonality, right? They have this film in common, they just experienced it together, and so they can talk about this to get to this.
Yeah, I so much enjoy that the power of art can meet everyone where they are. It has this ability to kind of open you up in your own chair when you're standing there in the gallery, or however you're experiencing it. It's personal. there's something very different about art when you're using it to tell history that separates it from the book, that allows you to have that internal dialogue with all of the recipients. And we're gonna slip into our next question, which will be the whole focus. And what is the best way to preserve Black history? We talk about art's importance in history, and I'll say for myself that when I was starting the Still Here project, I was confronted with this question: how do we preserve Black history in our community? The national narrative is never the provincial narrative, is never the local municipal narrative. And anytime any of these levels of organization, the community, the family, try and put something out, it only seems to last a generation. So I was thinking, how could something last 200 years? And I thought it was books. So to me, I wanted to put out a book, because we still have books and we don't have buildings that were 200 years ago. But I wonder, for each of the panelists here, what do you think is the best way to preserve our Black history when we know it is often attacked, ignored, and there's too few of us there to defend it, share it, and promote it?
Okay.
You want to start?
That is a question that I have pondered and pondered and pondered, and I'm still pondering, and I don't think I will ever arrive at a satisfying answer. But for now, the place that I've landed is through teaching and writing, and curating, and just opening spaces up for these kinds of conversations to continue happening. For me, I think it's all about keeping the curiosity alive and, putting more fingers into the black hole that I was telling you about. Earlier today, we were talking about what was the question, the one that you asked that got you here. Mine was, how come there aren't that many Black people being presented in Canadian museums? That's a question I asked over a decade ago, and I have yet to, fully satisfy the curiosity. And I describe it as, I put my finger in a black hole, and now I'm being sucked in. And it's a wonderful black hole to be sucked into, not a, terrifying existential crisis black hole all the time. But to me, it's about maintaining and embracing that curiosity, and teaching and writing and curating for me are ways to hopefully spark that curiosity in more people, right? Who then will spark that curiosity in others, and sort of produce a domino effect where more people are asking questions and more people are dipping their finger into the black hole. So that's my solution for now.
It's a good one. I think for me, it's not one way. I think that much like when we think about problem solving, it's not as if there's only one way to solve a problem. There can be many ways to solve a problem. So I think it's a question of the multiplicity, the diversity of ways that we can record and preserve that history. So, because otherwise we can get stuck on, is this the best way or is that the best way, and then do nothing. Right? Whereas if we think about it in much the same way as we think about art, someone might write a poem, someone might create an installation, sculpt something, paint something, take photographs, make films. So that as many ways there are, creative ways in terms of using art, I think we need to think about what are the many ways we can use, we can harness to record that history, because it's like when you're in a classroom, not all students in that classroom have the same way of learning. Some students might learn visually, and so showing them something is a much more effective teaching tool. Someone has a great ear for something, or someone visually. So in the same way, I think we we can find a multiplicity of ways, you know. So the oral history is important, you know, transcribing, finding all of these different ways to record, you know, and preserve that history. Because in the next 10, 15 years, even things that are digital may not be accessible necessarily. So we have to always be working and expanding, you know, the toolkit.
Always being active participants of history. That's not something that I thought of. I'm learning here on this panel as well. My idea was, so my finger on the black hole question was, why doesn't anyone know about the history of Black New Brunswickers when we know the Maritimes was, you know, together before Canada was even Canada? So when we talk about the enslaved individuals, we talk about Black loyalists, when we talk about all of this used to be Nova Scotia, and then it used to be Acadia, and then it still, and as always is, Indigenous land. We forget how strong the population of Black Canadians and their communities were here from the jump. So that question kind of tapped me on the head, thinking, why doesn't anybody know this? And I was pulled into this world of, okay, well, how do I keep this story going and keep that curiosity alive? I wonder for you, Sylvia, what was that first moment? Because I love and respect your answer of, we need to do everything we can to keep this conversation going. And you have used poetry, you have used teaching, you have used documentary film. I wonder, what was the entry point for you, that first question or spark of curiosity that set you on this path?
Probably there were a few, but I think in terms of, if I take film, for example, because that's probably the most complex of the forms I've used. And it was, when I was young, when we looked at television, there were very few people that looked like me on television. So I distinctly remember watching this maritime show on CBC called Sing Along Jubilee. And it was a musical show, and people were singing and whatever, and there was a Black person on this show singing, and it was Lorne White, the brother of Portia White. And it was a big moment to see him on television. And then going to films, never seeing any Black people in the films other than, and I would go to see this movie a lot, it was some movie called either Beach Blanket Bingo or something like that, but guess what? Stevie Wonder, little Stevie Wonder was in that film. There he was singing, you know, and clapping, and that image. So, you know, so there were a few of those images that you know, Stevie Wonder, then Sidney Poitier, Lorne White, not Lorne Green, Lorne White, and I thought, well, why is it that I'm not seeing those images? And in my community, I'm seeing Black people, women, men doing all kinds of things, but they weren't in the school textbooks, they weren't in magazines, they weren't in the newspapers. And to me, the image was so important, and so that, I think, propelled me into, and regarding the first film, Black Mother, Black Daughter, was to be able to capture those stories and to see Black women big on the screen, to see the beauty of their color, to see the beauty and to hear their voices. So that propelled me to begin that film work. Yeah.
That's amazing. The seeing yourself represented in the image and then dedicating yourself to say, I want to put the people that I know that have done amazing things in that image. I will help them. You will build the platform and screen the movie where they will do that. To me, that it makes me think on how important it is just to show up and all of us just being out in the public and the after effects of us being able to do that. And Joanna, I want to come to you now and just ask, as a teacher, how have you seen in the classroom Black history, I know you teach about Black Atlantic art, it having those side effects of sparking other people's curiosity through the work you do. I'd love for you to touch on that.
Well, it's been very interesting. Thank you for that question. To sort of witness my students realize that this is a thing they're actually interested in. So there's like I'm going to say a smorgasbord of reactions. So I have my Black students who will, almost every time I teach, there's always one, at least one, who says, "You're the first Black professor I've ever had." The firstism that we were talking about the other day, this idea that we're still in this state, even though I'm sure that there have been other Black professors before me, but for that student, this is their first touch, their first contact. And a lot of my students are seeing themselves as potential artists or potential art historians or potential curators for the first time. And then I have my non-Black students who are saying, "I can't believe I've never been taught this. How am I in my third year of my undergrad and I've literally never seen a Black artist? How am I, at this point in my academic career, and I don't know, I can't name a Black Canadian artist, or I can't." And so a lot of them are sort of coming to terms with how little knowledge they've received through the educational system, and there's always a little bit of, I don't know how to describe it, but that curiosity comes also with an undercurrent of frustration and a sense of almost betrayal that they feel, as if something was taken from them, which I think is an interesting combination of responses, because they feel like, the sense that I get from my students is that they wish they had known, and that opportunity was not given to them through their education. And so, yeah, I would say that's sort of the smorgasbord that I'm witnessing right now.
That's thank you very much for sharing that. A betrayal that people outside of the African diaspora feel when they haven't been educated on the excellence. It's on this side of the grass in the Black Canadian community. We know of people that are amazing artists. We know of amazing musicians. We've grown up with them. They babysat us when we were kids. Like, we know amazing, internationally recognized figures. And it's so strange that these people that give us so much life, on the other side of the heritage, imaginary boundaries, it seems that it doesn't translate. There's such an amnesia around the excellence that has helped shape the culture of Canada. And I'd like to go back to you, Sylvia, on that theme of the best way to preserve Black history. How do we bring other heritages in? How do we weave our story with the national story and bring other people in? How have you found that through your documentaries, through your poetry books? How have people outside the Black community reacted to your work to preserve Black community history?
Thank you. Thanks for that. It's been in the main, a very positive experience sharing that work. And again, it's often because, like Joana was saying, for so many people, when I've engaged with audiences, it's new information. Older generations might say, "Well, I heard something about that, but I didn't know much about it." So I think that in the main, it's been a very positive reception, and in some cases, causing people to reflect about their own background, their own experiences, their own families growing up. So it can actually help facilitate some research and exploration in terms of what people who come see and think. So it can help foster that. It's not without resistance. So I think it behooves me to say there's always been, and there always will be, and this is what we have to fight against, the I call them pockets of resistance in terms of how people in white power structures both may appear to be very receptive and want you to come in and want you to do this, but really there's a question of them preserving the way things are, preserving the status quo. I remember experience from many, many years ago talking with a group of teachers about including different Black history elements within the courses. And there was this one gentleman in the front row who just scowled at me the entire time, and essentially was that he had no Black students, and so why was he, why were we bothering to talk about this? Because the sense was, if there are no Black students, or you could replace that with no South Asian students or Indigenous students in the class, then you don't need to teach about that. But this is a country that has people from a variety of backgrounds that have been welcomed here by Indigenous people. And so the Black history, Indigenous history, South Asian history, it's all Canadian history. So it's a question for me of looking at the complexity of the history and being inclusive and not excluding people. And so, those pockets are there. They will continue to be there. You'll see cosmetic changes, and that may pacify some people, but we can't accept cosmetic changes. We need fundamental institutional changes, especially in the educational system and in all of the specifically publicly funded institutions, on these matters, because it's all of our tax dollars. So that's one of the things I'm always talking about, is that if it's a public institution, we're public. So, the funds that are there are not private bank accounts, so.
That's Pockets of Resistance. Short story of mine, the question was, why aren't there Black New Brunswickers? Why aren't there knowledge of Black New Brunswickers? But the spark was actually on CBC, history professor going on and saying that slavery never happened in New Brunswick when, Dr. Harvey Armani Whitfield published a whole book on slavery in the Maritimes with historical documents of the actual slave ads, of the Supreme Court of New Brunswick and Fredericton debating if it should be legal or not, and them coming to an impasse so it stayed legal. Like, the people in these institutions that don't want to change, it's odd for them when you've already heard stories of how the students are so empowered to have this information about Black artists or just other cultures in general. I ask of the audience to think, how much do you know of your own family stories and history? How much can you know your great-great-great-grandmother and grandfather, and what were they doing at the age you are now? Us telling our stories can act as a catalyst to find out more about your stories, and that can empower you to feel more solid in today and feel like, oh, my great-great-grandmother did this, and that kind of reminds me of something I do now. If we carve pieces of history away and say this is the curriculum, all of us lose. It has to be holistic, and on those pockets of resistance, of which we know there are too many, Joanna, I would be teaching Black Atlantic art, which is I'm sure a very new topic. So I would love to hear a little bit about some of the pockets of resistance you've overcame, just surrounding that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, pockets of resistance are very real. When you said that, I thought of the many, many instances of new hires who get, given a place in an institution under the banner of EDI or inclusion or whatever, and essentially they're told, come in, sit down, please touch nothing. And thankfully that hasn't been my entire experience. But I know that it's a real thing, and I do feel it in my classrooms, right? And every semester, without fault, I start the class with maybe 80, 85 students in my class. But by the time the ad drop date, because students shop around, it always drops by at least 20 people, right? Roughly. And I know that in those numbers, there are folks who have decided not to engage. I'll give you an example. I had a graduate student in a class literally titled Black Archival Practices in Art, something, something, along those lines. And the student came to me and said, oh, you know, like a white woman, sorry guys.
Talk your talk.
She came to me and said, oh, you know, like, as a white woman, I'm not sure. I've never done this before, and you know, I'm out of my depth. This is week 1 of class, and so, you know, this was an exchange by email, and so I sit down and I write a long email saying, I understand this is difficult work, and it's normal that you're uncomfortable, and this is your opportunity to develop the tools that you feel you're lacking. This is your chance to have these conversations, and I'm here to help, and I want you to succeed. And she dropped the class without really replying to my email. And so those are the pockets that I've been encountering, is students, particularly white students, saying they don't feel equipped and walking away from the opportunity. Because to me, I try and make my classrooms into a space where I hold people through their mistakes and I hold people through their learning, because that's part of the work that I want to do, right? I want to help people develop the tools and understanding and grow as individuals as they learn these things and as they sort of come to terms with all of the issues that I encounter and that we all experience and that sort of shape the world that we're in. And sometimes there are people who are just not willing to sort of pass that threshold. And so those are the pockets that I have been encountering in my classrooms.
Thank you very much for that response. It is difficult when you come to that realization that, again, the betrayal, something has failed you, and for that individual student, I think a little introspection on, like, why do you feel so uncomfortable at this moment is, why didn't anyone say this? At which point shouldn't there be an intervention of the family or the friends or the media or the culture to introduce these topics? How odd is it that we have people in our society, when you both were talking about the firstism, how odd is it that we're 400 years later and there's still, you know, amnesia, so that everyone who comes forward in the Black community is the first, and we accept they're really the 10th or the 12th or the 15th, but that institution locks down and erases any of the previous existence, not only just the progress, but the existence of Blackness gets erased and tossed into the void. It leaves a mark on everyone in the community, because now when we're faced with this void, this loss, we have to come to terms with, oh, that's something we don't know? How have I never encountered that? How have I never encountered that? And it's rough, but I'd also like to say we have that too in the Black community, except on us it's, how does no one know this? How can we be so ignored in amnesia? How can we be so present and seen as so hyper visible, and yet from the organizational standpoint, completely invisible, that it's a shock and surprise if we do anything of marginal merit? And I would like to now bring it to Sylvia Hamilton, Order of Canada recipient, and say, can you please talk a little bit about that?
Talk about
of what it's been like being an Order of Canada recipient.
That's not on the list. Thank you. It's been a very remarkable and humbling experience to have, received the information. First, how it happened is I received an email asking me to get in touch with the Governor General's office, which wasn't unusual in the sense I've been on Governor General's awards juries in the past. So an email from that office, you know, I thought, oh, well, what time is it? Maybe that's why I'm being asked to call, because they might wish to ask me to take part on an upcoming jury. So I called the office, and the person I spoke with had a real lovely lilt to her voice and said, you know, I'm calling you with some very good news. And I thought, oh, that's not a jury. And then she, and then she told me that I was being, I have been appointed to the Order of Canada, and that I would, eventually there would be a ceremony, and I would receive things in the mail, and there'd be correspondence. And so, yeah, that's how it happened. And I, put my phone down, and I was just, the first thought was about my parents, my grandparents, my ancestors, my family, and the community of Beachville that nurtured and raised me. And that's why I knew it was important, because it was important for them. And then I was sharing, I think yesterday, I started getting all of these incredible messages from people who were happy, who were so happy. So when something happens to you as an individual that can make other people happy in this life, in this time, in this fraught time, if that can happen and it can bring a smile on people's faces, I thought, well, great, that's wonderful. I was very happy, because that even added to the honor that other people were sharing in the happiness. So, and then it's just caused me to reflect on, my community, on in fact the work that I've done, and I try not to do it too much, because when I talk with my sisters, I say, I feel a little tired, and they say, well, yeah, of course, but just trying to reflect on the work that I've been committed to doing, and I've always tied that back to respect and honor to the ancestors, because in one of my poetry books, and maybe in the film, there's a phrase that I use, which is, I am who they imagined. Right? I mean, they had incredible imaginations in order to think beyond themselves, in order to think about generations to come, and that the suffering that they had to go through was because they believed that something better would come for the next generations, and I'm a direct beneficiary of that. And I feel it's my responsibility to continue to do that work to honor them. So thanks for asking.
No problem. And it's important, because as we talk about people that reach the heights of the organization, there's nothing higher than the Order of Canada, everyone. I just wanted to know that. And when Sylvia was talking about this yesterday, just being so happy that everyone else was happy, I was just thinking, yeah, we won. When Sylvia won, she's like, we all won as a country when she got the Order of Canada, that's now etched in stone somewhere and saying, look at this amazing person sharing family community stories, and everyone from every place she touched and screened a film now gets to share in that. It's something special, and I like that you mentioned your community. And I'm going to go to you now, Joanna, because you have given a gift to the New Brunswick Black community with this exhibition. You could have chosen to have this anywhere, and you chose to bring this specifically here to the Owens Art Gallery. And I would just like to ask you, what is the importance of place specifically for this gallery, specifically for this exhibition?
Thank you. Well, I mean, the place is the reason. Emily and I cooked up an idea that we would work together on a show, and then I came here, and I was like, oh, this is what it is. That was it. So I really had not much to do with it. I just allowed the history to tell me what needed to be done. So I spent a long time in the archives. I spent a long time reading history books and trying to sort of put my finger on the pulse of this place. And I truly hope that I've done it justice with this exhibition. It was really about creating an opportunity for people to put their finger on the black hole, right? And putting things in place, putting a few truths together in this space, in this place, and inviting people to engage. And that's all I did, really. The artists are the ones who really, the artists, the archives, they're the ones who matter. I just ushered them into a space.
Well, I thank you for your humbleness, but you did set the frame,
Yeah.
and I think that's your name under curator on the wall right behind you. So for those unfamiliar with the New Brunswick black art scene specifically, to have a black art exhibition at an institution such as the Owens, at an institution such as the Beaverbrook, is quite rare indeed. So to have it at this level, at this caliber, and to bring in artists from across Canada to New Brunswick and to say, this is the place where you can show your expression, creative excellence, that's just a wonderful start of momentum for all of the artists and people here. And we're going to be telling everyone to run in here. And it's a gift, truly, you've given us. And I appreciate you going through all the flights, staying at the Coastal Inn, a lovely place, and actually, like, following through. I remember when she was, a couple years back, I got an email asking for help for the history and everything. You did the work. You could have just been a curator putting on a show, but instead you were a member of the community. So I just wanted to give you your props for that. And to move on to our next point, Sylvia, I really enjoyed you talking about our ancestors going through so much struggle, and the reason they did it is because they had hope, because they knew something better was coming. And so I wonder if now we couldn't engage in some collective dreaming of, if we had the infinite resources and time, what are some moves we would like to see for the future so that, we're a little better off in the next 100 years than we are this year? What is something you would do? And perhaps we'll even say a piece of art tool. I'll start and say I love books. I think books in a relationship with the archives are so important in getting them in school. As a poet myself, I think as long as we keep printing books on everyone's history and talking about the families, my book Still Here is 15 generational black families, and we specifically used a large number of people to kind of just like cold water in the face. Oh, there's a lot of black people that have been here for hundreds of years that still have their deeds from the crown for 30-something for black refugees that came up Underground Railroad. They still have their deeds. So hundreds of years they've been on that land, and I think cataloging that and putting that in books in schools is my 1%, I think, that will multiply over the decades. But I'd like to go to you, Sylvia. What's something that you would like to see?
I think about children. I mean, that's the first thought that comes to mind always now. What are we doing to love and support and nurture children and provide them with what they need to be fully flowered individuals who can contribute and who can live the lives that they want to. And so that means, to me, looking at the places like the educational system where they spend so much of their time, the community centers, the daycare centers, where, and the people who work with children are often, really not paid what they should be paid. I mean, and they're dealing with the next generation. So, I mean, if resources were unlimited, the first thing for me would be, what can we do to support and keep children healthy so that they can grow, so that they can think about what art they might want to make. So publish books, do other things, but but the focus for me has to be what's happening with children and in schools these days, and what the teachers who teach them, what's their mental health like. So yeah, for me, and then, the next layer out is children around the world. This is a very resource-rich country, so we need to support and do things in this country, but we also have a human responsibility for children elsewhere. So
Yeah, I'd like to put a little pressure on that to get a little, we're not going to write any policy in this section, but we know daycare workers don't want to be teachers. We know teachers don't want to be parents. We know parents don't want to be teachers. So where can we find that capacity in this, the people that interact with the next generation, to help them share those collective responsibilities of teaching, guiding, securing, protecting, inspiring? How can we help all those contact points with the next generation feel more comfortable in, just expanding their role in the next generation's life?
how do we do that? I mean, I think, again, it's, as I said earlier, there's no one way. I think there's multiple ways. So I think in terms of teachers, it's looking at what we teach teachers, right? Within schools of education, teachers' colleges, what are we teaching them? I think that government policy, particularly around the funding of daycare centers, and then I would tie into that the funding for shelters, because there's so many women and children who are fleeing and needing to flee from domestic, violence. So we need to find those supports and increase the money that goes to those shelters, so that there's that network there. And I think it's fundamental changes in government policy and putting pressure as well on the private sector to ensure that the workplace is healthier, specifically for women.
Thank you. And everyone, what does this have to, if we're all comfortable and if we all have things, if we can all dream and have ambitions and curiosity, and we don't have that fear or shame to go after things we like, society just gets better. Problems start getting solved. So when you start looking at these wicked problems and you go down to the root like this, you really start figuring out how to make everything win, not just us, but the grass and the trees, the birds and the bees. Everything is going to win if we start to remove this shame and fear. And so now to you, Joanna, what are some things you would like to see if we had unlimited resources and unlimited capacity to bring more love into the world for the next 100 years?
Yeah, I think what Sylvia said and what you just added, and also, I agree that once everyone feels held in their fullness, right? All of their needs are met, they're well rested, they're fed, so much possibility opens up. So all of this, and also, I imagine a world where we can play, where there's the freedom to really expand. I don't know how to articulate that any better than being able to be our full selves. I also imagine a world in which there's, like you said, no shame, and I would really, really love a world where education is not something that is behind a paywall, which is, I work at a university, so everything I do is in some capacity behind a paywall, and I try, in a variety of ways to chip away at that. And I would love to no longer have to spend time chipping away, and I could just freely and openly share as much as possible, and people could benefit and partake in the project of building the world that we want, building a world where everyone is safe and held. So that's what I imagine, in addition to everything that we've sort of brought in.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for that, Joanna. Imagine a world where we can play. I think that's, now I'm going to change my answer. I mean, Sylvia keeps giving me lists, and I love lists. Give me 12 solutions. I don't need just one. I'll say, I do love books, but what's near and dear to my heart was being raised in a multi-generational home that my aunts, uncles, and cousins were of multiple ages. I think my true spiritual answer is gathering. I don't think we come together enough. I think we just need to come to the table and eat food or drink water, whatever. It doesn't have to be fancy or cook. Bring back the potlucks. I think we lose so much when we're not sharing the space and just coming together much like this, that for any issue I've had in my entire life, coming together with the people I've had friction with or disagreements or dreams has always come out better on the other side. So I would say gather more with the people that are around you. Whether you like them or not, I guarantee you, you will grow and become a better person for that, because there's something in the disagreements that opens us up, that holds us in that space and lets us decide internally, are we ready to learn right now? So I'll just put it back to the panelists for final thoughts, and that's all I have. This has been an honor and a joy to speak to both of these amazing Black women and everything they've been doing for the community at every level of organization. So I'm just blessed to be here.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming in. And I guess and thanks for the conversation. My last comment really is to implore everyone to just use your voice, use your pen, write those letters, make those calls, because we are at a critical moment in this world, in this country, in this province, in my province in Nova Scotia, and I don't really think we can afford to be complacent or simply do our doom scrolling and say, oh, well, someone else will handle it. Yesterday when I was reading, and I referenced the Mass Casualty Commission in Nova Scotia and the question of domestic violence, and so you can see that, and children, those two elements are just critical to me, and I think that trying to find ways to address those issues will be critical to how our communities develop. And so whatever you can do, and don't underestimate what a phone call or a letter, an actual letter, to the premier, to the prime, those things do get counted, even though we think they don't. They do get counted, because it is a way to use your voice. So be bold, use your voice, use your pen. And thanks for coming.
Period.
Way too much about me. I started my journey very atheist and not believing in spirituality, and I'm 180 on that now. Hope is the most important thing for all of us. And in the Black community, our ancestors give us something we don't have a concept of impossible, because we always have hope that tomorrow can be better. So there's nothing we can't do. That sense of hope, that inner, when you're scared, you have that light inside you to hold on to. That's the most important thing. That's curated by love, by the way. I could do a whole talk just on hope. Don't get me started. But that inner light is the most important thing to get you to doing anything you want, and that is the gift the Black community has gotten from their ancestors, because they are still singing in our souls today. And I'll pass it on from that.
I don't know about, I mean, I can only speak to my own experience and give this one example. I mentioned earlier the community that I grew up in, which is Beachville, and this weekend, our community church, Beachville Baptist Church, is celebrating 180 years. That's its anniversary, 180 years. And a lot of the activities that are happening are being led by the younger people in the church. So there's, in that little spot, there's a lot of hope. As well, the community has been very active in engaging with the city government around boundaries and going back to the original boundaries of the community when it was established in 1814, 1815. So, 180 years. So I'd say that in that little spot, our little location, there's a fair bit of hope. Yeah, and it's being nurtured. So thanks for the question.
I would say, in addition to hope, that I think that laughter, like really pure, down in your belly laughter, is, for me, a place of hope, right? When I can feel that, I feel like anything is possible. And I feel like that's another important piece, right? The other side of hope is joy. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. Laughter, that's important.
I can get us going. I feel like this is a conversation we had earlier today. And it's a tough nut to crack, I'm gonna tell you. It's something that I'm very aware of. It's something that I contend with, and I'll speak specifically to my curatorial work and what I see in the archive, right? Because those moments become visible in the archive, especially in art institutions, and I don't know how to feel about these moments other than to witness them and to experience them, and then to keep doing what I'm doing, because ultimately we know that these moments are not moments. They're just visible, right? This is an ongoing, continuous, long-standing story that continues to be written, and it's great when more people become aware and feel interpellés, called to action.
Yeah,
That's not a good translation.
There's not a
but
good English word for that.
It's good when people feel sort of that pull to be like, oh wait, like I should do a thing, I should whatever. That's great. And my hope is that, and the thing that I say to my students a lot is that this is a marathon, not a race, right? And oftentimes when we have these moments, people sort of go in with a sprint mentality when they need to be thinking more like speed walking, Because the depth of the issues that we're trying to untangle is so profound that it's not possible to think that you're going to be able to resolve all of it in a satisfying, fundamental way within a couple weeks or even a couple years. If you're in it, you're in it, and that's the end. And you're probably not going to see the end of it. And making peace with that is, to me, a crucial aspect of committing to this work.
I'll go next because I want Sylvia to end. Yeah, the window into the consistent excellence, success, and struggles of the Black community that these moments provide, I go back to my previous answer, just view it as a chance for gathering. I think once, the world, the community, CBC, CTV, the, people, the politicians notice something and they jump on to talk, the tokenism starts. I see in that moment, it's time to make relationships, make relationships, make relationships, make relationships, and keep that conversation going with those individuals, because the organizations, they all have, yearly reports and annuals. They don't have the capacity to actually be a full-time ally because they're in the system that has ignored and erased us. So they don't even have the budget or the people or the staff to even uphold that. But the people in these organizations, when they notice, you can build friendships with them, and then they can say, hey, there's a grant, or hey, we're doing something for this. Hey, we have this thing. Can you come in and speak? The relationships you build in those moments during the marches, during the sit-ins, that's what I focus on. And because we aren't, as Joanna said, we're not going to see the end of this. We're dealing with a colonized system that was built hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Why do we think in our lifetime we're going to see the solution to it? Why don't we just have as much joy unraveling what strands we can right now, and it'll snap when it snaps?
I think it's important to think about moments as part of a chronological movement in time. So when things happen, we need to remember, and if we don't know, it's where history comes in. If we know history, and if we know history in a very detailed way, we can understand that what is happening now is connected to what might have happened before. So, the kinds of things that happened in 2020, the mass demonstrations and such, 1992-93, when Mr. Rodney King was murdered, there were mass demonstrations and across Canada and stateside as well. We had a huge one in Halifax, and that march is what I captured, part of that march in Speak It. So that was, then you call it a moment, but that's part of this whole chronological acts of resistance that have happened over time. And if we simply look at them as a moment, we're looking ahistorically, and then it's like, okay, well, we don't really need to do too much, or we've done this, and that's okay. But we need to look historically at these things and continue to develop strategies, because racism morphs, right? Morphs. And so the things that we may have tried before may not work right now. So moments are important, but moments are only part of a historical context and chronology. So from my mind, we have to look at them in that way. So thanks for the question, though.